And as I notice more moderates and lefties come in, and even people on the right who admit that climate change is an issue, that if we as a cohort look disproportionately like we are of the belief that climate change isn't an issue, does it potentially make the people coming in think maybe these Bitcoiners are crazy? Or is that what you're worried about?
My worry is on a couple levels. I think the most fundamental part of it, and I think this is one of the downsides of social media. And social media and we struggled with it when we were building our pseudonymity service, is the idea that pure anonymity or identities with no cost tend to create this, what's called, in iterated prisoner's dilemma. It becomes a race to the bottom. Whereas if you invest in your identity and there is a cost to it, you tend to be a little bit more cautious about the things you say, because at the end of the day, it's like, I want to be able to sit down with that person. That's why. So, I used to try and get in arguments with people on social media, or when they would troll me, I would respond. But at a certain point, I was just like, you know what? I DM them, say, I'm happy to buy you a coffee anytime. Come say that to my face. And if you want to make that a point, I may agree with you, I may not, but healthy people can disagree. And almost everyone just goes away, or they're like, oh, you're so much nicer than I thought. I expected you to, troll me. And so freedom money and the principles that I think supersede so many of these debates will require you to have people you disagree with fundamentally about some big issues sit next to you and own the same asset class you do. So I tend to focus on, okay, why create waves, or why create the ability for enemies of freedom money to paint us as crazies, to minimize the impact, to, in some cases, just ignore. I mean, it was one of my biggest criticisms of some of the altcoins, not that they shouldn't exist. It's free open source software. And yes, there was scammy behavior. Like tons of horrible marketing, scammy, profit sharing, like by how they do coin distribution. But that exists in a lot of industries, right? There are lousy people doing telemarketing fraud. There are lousy people doing other Ponzi schemes. Like, that wasn't my biggest concern with it. My biggest concern was, if that's someone's first experience with digital currency and they get rug pulled and they're on the downside of this, what if that means they're not going to participate in the real revolution, Bitcoin, for 5 to 10 years?
Well, we know that exists because whenever I get approached by friends or family or friends' family and they start asking about Bitcoin, there are people out there who just think it's a scam. I mean, in buying the football club, I've had journalists within the football sector who do not understand what Bitcoin is. They group it in with all cryptocurrencies, and some of them cannot see the difference between Bitcoin and an NFT. They've just lumped it all together, and they think there is a scam going on. So I'm with you on that. On the anonymity thing, that's a super interesting point, because I've had very public opinions about certain things. They've come back to bite me. I've thought very quickly, or I've tweeted very quickly a response to a situation in the news, whether it's what's happening with the war at the moment, whether it's COVID, and I've proven to be wrong or missed the nuance. And I did an interview yesterday on this podcast, and they were asking me about some of these things. And I said, because my identity, essentially I'm agreeing with you. I didn't say these words, but essentially because my identity is public and because my career is public, there is a cost to being wrong. And so I have to invest more time in really trying to think through things so I give a more genuine or accurate, balanced opinion on things. So I did it recently. I wrote a thread in response to Saferdine's climate change thread, which was a very considered and I thought balanced reply, because that's the responsibility of the job.
Yeah. Well, and we have to understand that our detractors and attackers are going to take our words and take them out of context. So It's a funny kind of story. So back when I started Zero Knowledge with Adam,
Yeah.
when we were building, obviously, this NSA-proof anonymity, pseudonymity system, I started doing media articles. I was a young geek, and I was used to debating things on the cypherpunk mailing list and all these like very hard libertarian communities. And I was like a full-on Randite libertarian, and had very strong beliefs that were somewhat associated with my age and my just what I had experienced at that point in life. And so there would be these reporters who would come in and do like 3-hour interviews with me, talking about, hey, the dangers of technology. Are you ever worried a criminal might use this system? Are you ever worried a pedophile might use this system? What about a terrorist? And I would go into a very nuanced, long-winded conversation where I'd be like, the same knife that can be used by, an attacker can be a scalpel used by a doctor to save you. An ambulance can, in the wrong hands, drive someone over, or it can pick you up and bring you to the hospital. Technology itself is inherently neutral, and, it's the user of the technology who has the morality. And the article would come out and be like, Austin supports child pornographers using his system. And I was kind of like, that's not what I said. So at one point, after so many of these articles backfired on me, the company finally got me media training. And, I was kind of like, this is ridiculous, but I actually learned a lot. And one of the techniques that they go through is how to talk like a politician, which just unfortunately is so painful.
A lot of words that mean nothing.
Well, and what they refer to as something called ATM, not A2M. That's something different. Don't search that. ATM is answer, transfer, message. Just careful for the audience. I don't know how young our audience is. So answer, transfer, message would be when someone came back to me after and said, aren't you worried about pedophiles using your system? I'm like, I think we can all agree that pedophilia is a horrible thing, and we're so glad that parents now have our tool to protect their children against it. Period. Answer, transfer, message. And that's it. Yes, it took the dumbing down of it, but especially with an untrusted source, your ability to go into nuance and have your words taken away. Social media and the 140 character quick back and forth, I think also has that tendency where it's so easy to just have a quick answer and the nuance gets lost. So you have to kind of focus on, okay, what is my actual media message? And early on in Bitcoin, when I first started spending a lot of time in Bitcoin, there were a couple of Bitcoiners, I won't name them publicly, but they were fairly prominent at that time in the Bitcoin community. Open source developers, some very strong opinions. And there were a couple of them who literally were going out and saying, Bitcoin is money for ISIS because free money is money for your enemy and terrorists. And Adam and I were laughing. And at one point I said, can we do a crowdfunder to do media training for these people? Because that's just not the message we want Bitcoin to be associated. That may be true. It is free money. But do you really stand up in the middle of what was going on in the world and say, I support ISIS money? Right? Like,
Of course you don't.
It's not smart communications, right? It's like, you don't run up to the US government and say, I'm supporting something that will represent your downfall because I believe you're all evil, corrupt people and you deserve to, follow the way Rome did. Is that really going to help? Is it going to get you anywhere?
No, but
is it going to make you friends?
A lot of people do talk like that.
Yeah. And I would hope that the conversation would actually evolve to one of harm reduction and less suffering. What is going to provide the less suffering for humanity? What is going to provide the most economic freedom? Because if you believe in those principles, you don't want to see people suffer and a system fail. You want to see a system evolve, and you want to help society get there by funding better politicians, better technologies. The work that Alex Gladstein is doing with the Human Rights Foundation is incredible because he literally goes into parts of the world where the use of freedom money is the difference between living and dying.
Yeah. I need to get his new book, actually.
Yeah, I just ordered my copy. But these are stories we can get behind. These are stories we should promote. And it's not because you can't have those beliefs, because who am I to judge anyone's beliefs? This is freedom money. This is a free society. Privately, I'll have a drink with someone and talk about, whether or not capitalism is good, whether or not socialism is good, whether or not UBI has a role, or whether or not a capitalist-based society based off Bitcoin can actually alleviate the need of UBI. Because those are worthwhile, really good discussions to have. But to stand up and say anyone willing to pay taxes to support this government is evil. I don't think that's, at least in my book, that's not how I choose to promote a technology that I think can alleviate human suffering.